Here we are, Raz. We're back.
Hey, good afternoon, Michael.
Yeah, nice shirt.
Thank you. Nice shirt. I think you actually designed
I'd
it.
started this. We're back. We're the generalists. I'm gonna say something real quick. Is we need subscribers. We haven't said this is the first time. We got really good consumption on our YouTube channel, but we'd love a few more of the click. I'm a subscriber thing. We're with JJ today. We're just gonna say JJ so we don't have any name problems.
JJ's great.
Clearly, you're the CEO and founder of OnLoop. Nice to wear your swag today.
Boyan Taylor shirt.
Yeah, we talk a lot in the various channels, which we'll get to today. And I'm saying that because I think we have controversial opinions sometime. Usually we align on them, but we both have controversy, but we'll be careful with those today. Founder of OnLoop, used to work at Uber, used to work at some other places, actively angel investing. You're Singapore's future naturalized Singaporean PM.
We'll see.
We're just throwing that out there. That's a first.
I would like to see that.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
That's it, all we're going to cover. And then we're going to jump into the questions.
Sure.
We kind of on a range of them today, which I think is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Don't feel afraid to push back, ask us some questions, or debate a few of these points.
Yeah.
A few of them were made to be debatable. Anything you want to add to that, Raz?
It's going to be fun.
Other than you're just happy to be here.
I'm super happy to be here.
Awesome.
You know, I prep for this podcast because it feels like the real deal.
It's probably on the camera, folks. You can see the prep, the big lights. This is legit, which makes it kind of fun. We just shipped episode 10, everybody. So if the whole thing of like, can you make it? We made it to 10.
Yeah.
I'm editing 11. I have 6 or 7 in the can. This is going to be another one. But we're excited to have you. I think we've been wanting to do this with you for a few months, but due to your busy schedule as a high-flying executive CEO, you don't always have the time to stop and speak to us mere mortals.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah. How'd you get to Singapore? And why are you still here?
Yeah.
And how'd you become Singaporean?
So I came to Singapore at 17. I grew up in India, in Calcutta, and most of my friends were going to the US or the UK for undergrad. But according to my parents, it was too far, too expensive, and they thought I'll be drunk on a pavement somewhere if I went to the US. And so...
Probably fair, right?
Possibly, but so Singapore...
Fair statement.
Yeah. So Singapore came up at this 3.5 hour away, drug-free, sort of, perfect city. And I had friends who were applying to colleges across both US and here, had given their SATs. I hadn't done my SATs, so I only applied to NUS and NTU at first. I actually got rejected at NTU and got into computer science at NUS. But SMU had this like small quirk that you could apply and then do your SATs after. So I ended up applying to SMU, did my SATs last minute, and ended up as an SMU scholar. And so...
Just management degree? What is it?
So
it's not the tech degree,
information systems and business. So,
business.
if you're an Indian kid and you tell your parents to live in the countryside business, then you get kind of disowned. And so I started with Infosystems first and then added the business degree on. And I tell people Singapore was my first pre-seed check, right? It was the first institution that invested in me. And I think that in many ways also drives my loyalty for the country and the institution. I left to go to the US for business school, but I came back after 4 years. And
Where in the US?
I was in California for 2 years in Palo Alto for my MBA, and then spent 2 years in New York.
Stanford, right? Yeah.
Stanford, and then 2 years
He
in
says
New
that
York.
reluctantly.
And then 2 years in New York, and then came back to Singapore in 2016.
Got it. And then when did you become a citizen?
Last year. So it took me 19.
Congrats.
It took me 19 years, 2 attempts.
2 attempts. Oh.
2 attempps.
And then the other ones are rejections? The
First one was rejection after 2.5 years. And so...
It's not too bad.
Yeah.
I'm in the rejected ones camp, yet to reapply.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And, as you've seen, I get kind of upset when people believe that they should get their passport the day they
we're not
show
going
up.
there today, but duly noted.
But I think it's an honor, and this country's done very well, and I'm glad it wanted me for life.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm thinking, I saw a profile, I'm following you, and Michael mentioned some few comments, which is good, but I want to rewind back to your early days.
Yeah.
You did so many different types of internships.
Yeah.
different gigs,
Yeah.
different places. Do you think it's what make you today, and how you can tell us like a bit about it?
See, life is retrospective rationalization, right? So it all makes sense backwards. But I think it would be a lie to say it was a plan. I think one of my regrets was that I didn't work as a teenager. So if you look at kids who grew up in the US or other places, they, bartend or work in restaurants.
Jobs,
And I think that actually teaches you a ton. But I never did any of that. So when I came to college, I was like, look, I'm going to take advantage of every summer that I have off. And my first ever paid job was to be an automation engineer at Hitachi Global Storage Technologies, which is a hard disk company that I think got bought by Western Digital. And my job was to use this tool called Macro Express to automate sales and customer success processes. So actually, there was a bit of a deja vu moment a couple of weeks ago when the Claude model came out that could now control your
control the
computer.
computer.
Yes.
You could do that 20 years ago. It was just different.
Yeah.
It was written in Logo and became assembly language. So like the mechanisms have changed. And frankly, I was paid $650 Sing dollars a month. I ate chicken rice every day for $2.
You were here.
I was in
Yeah.
Singapore.
You
at
probably
Kaki
felt like
Bukit.
a king, right?
Well, yeah, it was like, Kaki Bukit and Ubi and
Where's your
so-
favorite
Chicken rice is cheap.
yeah, correct. And so, but I think it taught me a few things, and I think that even in these early jobs, I gravitated to a place where I could make impact and add value. I think often people take internships not very seriously, and they're like, I'm going to muck around for 3 months and then leave. I actually ended up rewriting a lot of their sales and success processes, taught about 60 odd people to like take over the software after I left. Like my last day in the office, I was getting dragged from point A to point B. And you realize pretty early on that if you tried hard, you could make impact. And it doesn't matter how much experience you have, but if you apply yourself, and I learned the term first principles thinking many years later. But I feel some of these sort of aspects of, go build good relationships, go and add value, really think about sort of how you can innovate with things that started early. And most of my internships were tech related. So I was a programmer when I was an undergrad. So this was automation engineering. I worked at Merrill Lynch as a software developer. I did TCS, technology consulting proposal. So it was mostly tech. And
Yeah.
I left that for a while and moved into management consulting, but I'm very grateful for those internships. So thank you for asking.
If you're looking back and you're thinking about you as an internship in few different locations,
Yeah.
is there a moment you say, hey, I met a person, he told me that, and I took it for life?
I don't think that happened in my internships. I actually, controversially enough, did not enjoy my Singapore college experience a lot.
SMU, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because it was quite segregated, right? Like the Indians hung out with the Indians, the Chinese hung out with the Chinese, the locals went back home because it wasn't a live-in university. So you go to NTU and NUS, you stay on campus. That's a very different experience. But I think the turning point for me was actually starting working at Accenture. It was my first job out of college.
Also here?
In Singapore,
Yeah.
in strategy consulting. And I met a manager who I'm still very closely in touch with, who ran the Singapore strategy practice. And, I've done well in school, but I've always had a problem with discipline. Like I'm not necessarily the
Like
world's...
listening to people, or what do you mean, like discipline? Order,
Doing his
organized, like what?
Like I've always been somewhat disorganized
Okay.
as a person. And I've kind of got away with it, like studied last minute, done exams and done pretty well. So that like gets ingrained. And actually Jamie Chatham was his name. He's in Chicago now. I recently left ENY. He was sort of working really hard to get me on this high visibility product in India. And he was like, listen, man, we're trying really hard. If I hear you go to this project and muck around, I'm going to wallop you. Wasn't going to fire you, wasn't,
Smack you upside the head.
correct.
Yeah.
And that actually really made an impact and really made me sort of put attention into building more discipline and ultimately realize someone cares about my
Yeah, I was gonna say the
development
fact
and
that
growth.
someone wants to discipline you is probably more coming from
Correct.
I think you can do better.
Correct.
I'm investing in you.
Correct.
Please don't let me down.
Correct.
Otherwise, I will smack you.
Yeah. And I think, in my career, I've been lucky to have people who've said, listen, we want to help you grow. And this notion of having a trusted manager has been sort of a mainstay of my career and something I've been grateful for.
I think it's important, during our career, if we meet these type of people and we have the capability to listen to them, because sometimes when we are young, we're like so enthusiastic, we're so ambitious, some of us.
We're not listening.
We're not listening.
And actually, Jim Collins termed this term called who luck, that who you meet early on in a career is probably one of the most sort of influential variables that affect your career trajectory. And if you hear a lot of stories of sort of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs or investors, there's a cult of a few that sort of lift each other up to move them forward. That's why the PayPal mafia works.
Besides Peter Thiel.
Sorry?
Besides Peter Thiel.
Besides Peter Thiel. And so, it's something that I've looked back on and realized that it makes a difference, but is an advice section later on. But I think picking who you work with is probably more important than what company you worked at or what your starting salary was. Because often at Microsoft or Oracle or these larger places, your experience is very different
based on who
depending
you're
on
working
who you're working with. And I find young people often sort of think about the brand or the name of a company versus the specific individuals that they're working with.
Yeah, because you could have a superstar at a lame company, but they might teach you a lot, right?
Correct. Or go on and do other things and take you along, right?
So let's let you give us, on your way to answering this next question, give us a little on-loop soundbite.
Yeah.
But then you talked a lot about CTD, as we call it. Collaborative team development. It's kind of in the product and in your philosophy for, I think, your product family.
Yeah.
So go ahead and explain.
Yeah, the genesis of OnLoop is I worked at Uber for 3.5 years and was utterly frustrated with the tools I had as a manager to get the best out of my team. And felt like we had to sort of rethink from first principles what makes up human productivity. And so we came up with a new way of measuring human productivity in 5 hierarchical layers. And the 2 base layers are someone's energy level and someone's goals. We like the word energy because often people have used words like well-being and wellness, which are softer words, and people often sort of dichotomize productivity and wellness. We think how energized someone is or motivated someone is really sits at the foundation of productivity, and often managers forget that or forget to check in on how someone is doing. The next layer on top of that is goals, and there's a lot of goal frameworks that people have come up with, OKRs and MBOs and KPIs. But what we realized is all of them are focused on measuring organizational performance.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I had not known this. OKRs comes from like the manufacturing industry and was later like repurposed by Google.
So John Doerr sort of wrote this famous book called Measure What Matters. And John Doerr was the first sort of loud check into Google. And so it's an approach that he came up with and researched and then kind of sort of put onto Google as a way for them to measure their progress.
I don't like them, by the way.
It doesn't work, right? Whether people like them or not is a different story. Like most things, there are people fanatics about it, but it takes like 3 MBAs full time to like manage and OKR process an organization. And that just doesn't work for most companies. And so we define goals as targets, projects, and skills. Those are 3 things that everybody can understand. And typically when you have a low performer, something's broken in those 2 layers. They're either not energized or motivated, or they don't have clarity on their goals. The next 3 layers are what we call sustaining performance layers. So 2 layers of feedback. So celebrate feedback to identify superpowers. Often people think about celebrate feedback for recognition, to like reward people, but actually what's more important is to help someone articulate, these are 3 to 5 things that I do really well. And then only once those 3 layers are in place, does the top 2 layers play a role. So improve feedback, which is constructive feedback to identify blind spots, and then continuous learning and growth. And every manager's job is to manage those 5 hierarchical layers for optimal performance. And we took a lot of inspiration from fitness as an industry that was able to break down health into diet, sleep, and exercise. And now the sort of products that are in the fitness industry are measuring micro habits around those 3 areas to help you sort of make progressive improvement in health. And we see the same thing in productivity. And so that framework sits at the sort of base of the work that we do, and our products sort of help you measure those 5 layers in a seamless manner with AI.
Got it.
For me personally, one of my hobbies
Yes.
is to adopt new collaboration models or management models, and I don't need to investigate or do a research so thoroughly to say, okay, this one I want to adopt. I'm just taking it and use it.
Totally.
What are the challenges today with OnLoop that you see with your potential customer or customers?
Yeah.
What's the adoption rate? What are the challenges of using this type of different framework?
We sort of built a framework accidentally, right? Like we set out OnLoop to solve performance reviews. Like I have a shirt that says, "You weren't born to write performance reviews," that I wear on most days. I put a shirt on for you guys. That's because I hated them, and
Everyone hates
them, right?
Not just you.
Correct, right? And didn't feel like a very good use of time. And so we started working with GPT-3 back in 2021 to automate performance reviews. But what we realized was that feedback as a concept was only one part of overall productivity. And actually, through our conversations with customers, I worked with a couple of Stanford professors when we started the company too, we realized that there are a few sort of clear layers to productivity. And then customers told us, look, we like your tool, but can you like come and teach our managers the framework too? Because we've never seen a model that breaks it down as holistically, but also really simply. And that's where we realized that solving culture or solving productivity is not just about a tool, it's about an approach. And therefore now our work with customers involves both the software as well as the training and transformation work to adopt the approach. Because I didn't start this company to be a software vendor. I started this company to help businesses transform. And actually we've made that shift as a business too. And that's made it feel a lot more fulfilling. Maybe if I was a software engineer, I'd want to just code a product and that's it. But I started as a management consultant and I like sort of being in physical rooms with customers, and our sort of shift from a software company to a hybrid company has sort of been more aligned to what I wanted to build.
Got it.
It's a tough challenge to be B2B. This is what I'm doing my entire life.
Yeah.
B2B. And now I have a statement and I want you to comment on it.
Sure.
You like to do comments, right?
I'm happy to comment.
Okay. So B2B Singapore startups can go global? True or false?
Absolutely true. In fact, they have no other option, right? Like if you look at, especially being a software company, the US is 50% of the global B2B software market. So it's not about global, it's about the US. And frankly, I think any software company, wherever they start, should focus on their home market and then the US. And along the way, you might pick up customers along the way. And also the reality is that people really respect US B2B companies. Having said that, I think this notion of a hybrid services plus software company is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. And often if you take venture funding, you're kind of pushed to this like pure software model.
Like two business models.
Somewhat myopically, but the reality is that customers want outcomes, right? And it's my gross margin that gets affected if I provide that outcome with more humans and less software. And I actually think that most businesses can be profitable day zero and sort of be default alive if they build that hybrid of software and services. And then once your software reaches product market fit, you can sort of wean off the services layer.
It's almost like a funding component. It's no different than like trying to find the revenue first or trying to, it's a funding component
Totally.
that might allow you to not have to raise so much capital.
Or just be like, paranoid about raising money. Because I think one of the things that, and I've gone through this for the last four and a half years, and my posture has changed from the right VC narrative to the right business, right? And I think a lot of founders who raise VC early on are paranoid about, is this the right narrative for VCs? And that often sort of pushes you away from building a good business from day zero. And today I'm much more focused on cash flow and revenue and making the business profitable because I want to control our own destiny. And frankly, I'm a whole lot happier. And I think I'm doing things that are serving customers. And as a first-time founder, you make a ton of mistakes. And I feel like that's one of the mistakes that I made was being very paranoid about, is this the right VC narrative? And will this look good for VCs versus what's the right thing for the customer?
And do you think in this B2B thing from Singapore, we say everybody should do it, and we know you can do it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the norm per se. And I'm wondering, if you read that Lightspeed report, I think you probably read it.
Yeah.
And then now we have the Google Southeast Asia report came out. I haven't even read it.
Yeah.
It's like we haven't really been concentrating on doing this.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of the substrate and even issues with the region for how we support local versus remote and the taxes that could make this better. Like what's your view on maybe why it didn't happen and what could be done to maybe continue to move along this path?
Yeah, I think first of all, Southeast Asia is not a region, right? And I think we make the mistake of thinking about it as one. And in fact, if you're a Thai company, you might be better off expanding to India than the Philippines because there's no benefit to moving to the Philippines from Thailand. So unless we become a currency union, a labor union, or a trade union, we should stop.
None is going to happen.
But even though my experience is with Europe, do you think that German and Italians are the same?
Right, but at least there is a labor union and a trade union and a currency union.
In some places, yes,
right?
but not always in business.
Correct, and so it's still somewhat better. But again, at Uber, I ran our investments in Southeast Asia, and I used to tell our teams, I'm like, look, New York City is 1.8 times the gross bookings of the whole of Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And
people forget to put it in context, right?
and like just New York City. And so, I think Singapore's missed a beat in sort of being Southeast Asia HQ versus truly being APAC HQ. And actually, I think...
Yeah, or even, Asia's HQ for global
startups,
B2B digital startups because we have the rule of law, we have good IP.
Exactly.
That's always been my beef or complaint that it should have been where we took the ecosystem kind of
and we still can.
pre or during COVID to say, look, we've seen the writing on the wall. We should take this nucleus of all these things that are of the strength of Singapore, but project a global software delivery / revenue capability, right? I know some people do it, but I don't think it's what the narrative is or what people are taught or what people are encouraged to do.
Yeah, because I think the next 10 years, India is going to be incredibly interesting. I think Japan's going to be incredibly interesting. And Australia is like a very sort of well-run small US to test US things out of. And so think about Singapore at the center of Japan, India, and Australia is a far better way to position ourselves than being the capital of Southeast Asia.
Korea even, these are all
Absolutely.
You might be better off with a couple trips to Korea and closing some deals and a couple trips to Vietnam and still wondering if they're going to pay the bill on the deal that you closed, right?
And I'm seeing a lot of builder friends move to India, move to the UAE, and move to the US. Yeah. And I've not seen such an exodus of innovator talent out of Singapore in the last few years.
But you mentioned Uber. I think there's probably tons that people learn from these things, but I want to more what did it teach you and what did it help you kind of figure out about the region and just growth and product? Because I think it's probably a school. I always remember when I got hired at AWS and my friend Andrew said, hey, look at it this way. It's like a paid MBA. Like you may not like everything about it, but you're going to learn a ton. And oh, by the way, you still get paid.
Yeah.
So I feel like the Ubers are that to other people. It's you learn an incredible amount. You were deep into the region, but what did you take away from it?
Yeah, and I was there for 3.5 years, a year and a half of Travis, a year and a half of Dara, a year and a half of Southeast Asia, a year and a half of sort of being in a global role after Southeast Asia. So it was a bunch of different things. But I think one of the things that made Uber is this notion of seeking truth and really not settling for status quo. And I think it made me a fighter in some ways and fighting for causes I believe in. I think I got rewarded for saying the thing that was the truth and not the right thing. Actually, 3 months into Uber, I got a memo from my boss's boss saying all in on Indo. But Indonesia was the worst market in the region because it was three-way competitive with Grab and Gojek. We were burning way more on a per trip basis with a very low average fare. And I made the hard call to pitch to Travis that we should take all of our investments away from Indonesia to other countries in the region, because ultimately what would matter was regional gross bookings. And when we sold the business to Grab, that's what mattered. And that wouldn't happen in every company where...
How was the reaction, like the first reaction?
I mean, Travis was a very sort of data-driven person, right? He's hardcore, so you have to know every number.
Yeah, know what you're talking about.
It's
right?
inside out, and if you mess that up, that doesn't matter. But I think what Uber did not do well was manage perception and press, right? And was seen as this maverick that was black in color and did not listen to anybody. And what that also taught me was that over time, perception trumps reality. And you might think you're a good person, but if the world thinks you're not or thinks you're evil, that's going to last. And actually, each one of our competitors took advantage of that by being colorful. So Grab and Gojek were green, Lyft was pink, Didi was yellow, and it was like the antithesis of what the Uber brand was.
I like the black thing.
Yeah,
That's me. Because I'm wearing black shoes. So.
And people listened. But the reason we were able to move as fast as we did was a few things. One, the company was super decentralized. And so everybody was empowered to make their own decisions. Data was super democratized at the company, so everybody had access to every metric around the world, and we shared a lot amongst each other. And we were really taught to be owners. Like, one of my favorite Uber values was be an owner, not a renter. And actually, if you think about founder mode or startup culture or all of those things, ultimately boils down to, does someone show up as an owner to do the thing that's needed, or do they show up to earn a paycheck? And I think that was so deep in the culture that we had, and we were all friends first and colleagues second. And so when you tried to do global projects, you just called your friends up, right? Didn't matter what org structures exist, right? I did a talk on Uber culture, and I said relationships eat org structure for breakfast, right? Like, if you have the right relationships across the company, it doesn't matter sort of what hierarchies exist. But it was a very special place, and it shaped me a lot. And I think if I'd worked at a different tech company, I would have been a different type of founder. I think where you end up sort of amplifies who you are. And
for sure.
I've realized I'm an Enneagram type 8, and I'm a warrior, and I fight for things I believe in. And so
are there pieces
Uber
of that stuff that you've taken into OnLoop?
Yeah, I mean,
not everything's going to work or be the right fit for your type of company, but maybe a few things.
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways we are fighting against status quo, right? Like, I think feedback and goals are so broken in organizations is because it's seen as an HR compliance process, versus we think that when feedback and goals sit in the business operating system, you think about it very differently. And we're very much a challenger product in creating a new category on how to think about an old topic, which is sort of goals and feedback. One of the other things that Uber did also really well is hire for sort of aptitude versus experience, and sort of take young people who are highly energized and passionate. And I've seen people at my company sort of go from being engineer to product manager, and without really having done those things in the past and really flourish. And so sometimes people over-index on what brands you worked at and what experience you've had. I think what I've not taken away is the level of aggressiveness with which Uber operated that I think
For execution?
No, just like just tonality and how people sort of operate internally. I think it can kill psychological safety. I think as a CEO, if you lose your cool, people are going to be terrified, right? No matter how friendly you are with them or how much you hang out with them. And
scare them.
Yeah, you scare them. And when people are scared, they don't speak up, they don't think. And so I think, how do you sort of push hard and are hardcore, yet sort of remain human and bring psychological safety, I think is something that I think a lot about. And today we see a fight of two cultures, right? Reid Hoffman and being soft, or Elon Musk and being hardcore. And I think the right answer is being hardcore plus human and finding a balance between the two. And I think Uber was at times probably a little too hardcore for its own good.
Yeah,
Do you? How many people are in
12.
12. Do you try your model in your company?
Oh, absolutely.
I had to ask it.
Absolutely. I mean, I also coach a few CEOs, and it's just consistently true that if someone's just not energized or not motivated, nothing else matters, right?
Yeah, it's fair. I hadn't thought of it that way. But,
And so there's a clear hierarchy of what matters when you're trying to help someone get the best out of them. And that goes into how one-on-ones get structured. We actually now take people's unstructured observations and can extract insights along those 5 dimensions. So, because I think where AI is powerful is taking unstructured observation or unique insight and then structuring it for what the right purpose is. But the model has stood every sort of, weapon I've put against it to try and break it. And it shows up in manager IC conversations. It shows up in sort of CEO coach conversations. It shows up in a lot of places.
makes sense.
We have, Michael or with other people, we have continuous debate about startups, VCs in Singapore. Now let's imagine together you're becoming to be the PM of Singapore. And you can fix 1 to 2 things in the startup scene over here. I don't want to say to make it better. I would say to make a difference. What do you do?
Yeah, I think Charlie Munger said this: show me someone's incentives and I'll show you how they'll behave. Right? And I think that holds true for a lot of things. And if you think about how Singapore is structured, a lot of it is focused on salary and safety. If you think about sort of a lot of the immigration policies that we have, or what children focus on when they go through school. Like, I asked an intern once, what do you care about when you graduate? And he's like, I want a stable job and fixed working hours. And this is a Raffles Institute SUTD top student in the country.
Supposed to be one of the top performers, right?
And I'm like, I've never been more worried
Yeah.
about the future of our talent if our best and brightest care about stability and 9 to 5 above all else.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a question of what people dream of and what's considered being successful that I think we have to change from the ground up.
How do you change dreams?
You change it from education systems, right? So here, all that matters is grades, right? And you're focused on PSLEs from the time
It's
you're
gotten
in.
better though. As someone who's in the public school system, because my son gets mad at my daughter because she's getting, hey, we've stopped
Right.
this test at P3, or we've stopped, and my son's like, wait, I had to do all of those. This isn't fair. Like, little bits are happening.
Yeah.
Still, unfortunately, you still land on PSLE day and everybody goes nuts. But
Yeah. And it starts early, right? And you start rewarding people for building or innovating or doing an entrepreneurial project, and that's fine if you get 82% versus 91%, right? And I grew up in the same culture in India, right? There was nothing else valued except sort of grades and getting a good stable job. So I think that's one. And actually, one of the case studies of success is NUS. And NUS, through a combination of its overseas college program where they send people to Silicon Valley and other places, as well as local incubation, has been quite successful in getting startups out of the ground. And I would shine a spotlight into places where success has happened and think about how we can expand that. Like, can we replicate that across SUTD, SMU, and NTU? Can we fund those programs better so that people take more risk? But I would take a focus away from salary and stability to actually experimenting and failing, especially when you're young. I think the other thing is when we import talent into the country, we have a focus on importing execs and consultants versus builders, right? So if you look at the criteria for the One Pass or the Tech Pass, it's based on salary.
yeah, money alone kind of is going to negate who can join, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we don't really sort of cater for, is this person going to build something? And often what I've seen is the people who come in on those passes, and I won't take names, end up sort of sitting on boards or becoming an exec coach and then take up full-time roles at other large companies, right? Versus actually building something from scratch and building businesses here. And so I would sort of try and assess the people we bring in and try and assess them for sort of building potential
Create
versus
an
exec potential.
talent visa. Like in the US, they have the it's for
Extraordinary talent. Correct. And which is what most entrepreneurs use. And I think basically the UAE are doing a slightly better job than us in attracting builders. I think the people that we attract are execs and not builders. And I think there's a distinction there. And then the last thing also is that we should celebrate founders more, right? Like, and I've told this to the EDB, like when I was a middle manager at Uber, because I worked at Uber, I thought I got more respect than being a founder. And we still have an obsession with large brands. We still think that people working at Microsoft, Google, Meta are sort of greater than someone running a dinky business, but running a dinky business is way harder than a lot of these jobs.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing like celebrating the funding round. We don't celebrate the I'm bootstrapped or I'm making it, I have revenue, or look, I've survived 5 years.
And by the way, I'm here in Singapore a bit more than a year.
Yeah.
I was observing that after 2 months, I will start to say, because I have a comparison to Israel.
Right.
Every small step that any entrepreneur is doing, it's on the newspaper.
Yeah.
We had Amanda Chu over here, which is BackScoop is one of the biggest things that I recognize.
Really cool. Yeah.
But she cannot be the only one.
No, 100%. And you guys have a role here, right? And you guys have a role to bring in failed founders and talk about failures. And, there's a platform that, could shine a light on that.
One
too.
of the things we're trying to do, and I'm sure it's why we don't get this crazy popularity vortex that I hear some other people, because they're getting the most named person, which is fine. But part of what we wanted to do was talk to everybody, right? Because there's not enough of the celebration around just... There's a founder. You may not have read about them. You may not know them. And they're definitely not famous, but they're doing something and they're here.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we're trying to do, right?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, we are a young ecosystem, right? And we have to remember that. Like Silicon Valley didn't get built overnight.
Yeah.
It's on a 4th or 5th generation. And I think we'll get there.
What do you peg it at? 15 years so far? Like, what's your...
I think 2010 is sort of the starting point for Singapore.
All right.
Right, roughly. And so it's been about under 15 years.
Yeah.
And I think what changes is when founders become investors, right? And your investing class is less big tech employees who became investors or investment bankers who became investors, but actually founders who became investors.
Yeah, I just pulled out of the Block 71 parking lot because I park over there for Oracle. Yeah. And there's a very shiny new Ferrari that... I'm hoping it's a founder who's made it.
Maybe a crypto founder.
Yeah, well, that's different. But we need more. I always tell people that's the stuff you gotta realize happens. That's the cycle.
Or just to build another company and be a second timer. Yeah. Lots of second timer.
But there's more of that now than before. But
like if you look at people like Peng or Xian, who been around the tech world for 20 or 30 years, have built in different places. Are Singaporean who are very committed to this region. Often I find a lot of people in the tech community who are opportunistically here, who may not be here in a few years. And they don't really care about authentically building those relationships for the future. And I think there's a group of globalized Singaporeans. Xian comes to mind, Peng comes to mind, Jeremy Tan comes to mind. So a few of these folks, I would double down on those folks.
Yeah.
Who we know are going to be here, who we know have seen a lot. And I think those folks can do a lot for the ecosystem.
Yeah, I agree. Good point. Generalism versus specialism. Where in the spectrum do you land and what do you believe in?
Definitely a generalist. But I think it's harder building generalist careers. And the number of senior jobs you can take on become smaller over time if you're a generalist. If you're a really good marketer, really good product manager, really good salesperson, like people
you can keep climbing that
Correct.
ladder very definitively.
Correct. Like,
but
get
when
to
you
see
switch
our-
gears, you might. One of the things I tell people as I've switched gears,
Yeah.
a lot of people, I probably have come down
Yeah.
a few notches,
Yes.
a few times in my life,
Yeah.
just from the context switching.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to stay on that, defined ladder. Right?
Totally. So I think it's a high risk, high reward career strategy. A lot of people ask me that is sort of, should you be a generalist or a specialist? And my usual answer is, what's your ambition level? And if your ambition level is super high and you want to run large companies, I think it's hard to be a specialist and do that, because you just won't see enough lateral dots to connect that over time. But if you want to have a good career and make decent money, then you're probably better off specializing. And that might be
It's easier, probably, too.
better answer. And so, but I'm a proud generalist, but I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody.
Fair point. And as a CEO, is I think generalism is almost required. But have you discovered that? Is that kind of like backed up your feelings around it?
There's an
Or-
Israeli founder, I think the founder of Wix, who said as a CEO,
That's tough.
you have to have a brown belt in everything. Right? So you're a black belt in nothing, but you're a brown belt in everything.
Yeah.
And I think the CEOs who can't do that, I think, struggle to scale over time, because they rely on others to run a function or tell them other things, and they can't ask the right questions. I think it's about finding that balance between, asking the right questions, but also relying on people. I don't think being in every problem in the company is the answer. But if you don't understand the basics of several functions, it's hard. I think where I've struggled as a founder is demand gen. Because as an employee, you never learn how to create demand for yourself. And as an entrepreneur, your number one job is demand generation. And you might build the coolest thing in the world, but if you can't attract people
to using it.
to it, it doesn't matter. And I think a lot of founders look down upon marketing and sales. They consider product and engineering cooler. When they think about jobs, they gravitate towards product jobs versus sales and marketing jobs. And I don't have the word regret in my dictionary because I think life's a sample size of one and I'm happy where I am. But if I did all over again, I would spend more time in sales and marketing.
Roles you have not had, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
When I'm younger, because it's huge as a founder.
It's huge. And for me personally, when I build the customer journey,
Yeah.
so customer journey, it's the customer, it can be your employees,
Mm-hmm.
it can be your colleagues.
Mhm.
And when you build a journey with them, they're gonna have to drive afterwards, but you can study from it only if you're doing type of a sales.
Yeah.
Walking in front of the customers, have fails, with contracts. And then you can speak about it. You can have intellectual conversation and then ask the relevant questions, because you say, ask a relevant question, but if I have no clue how it's look like, I didn't do it myself,
Yeah.
it's gonna be tough to ask like a tough questions, I guess, no?
Totally, and I think that touches on the coaching point, right? And one of my pet peeves is anybody being able to coach anybody in whatever role they're in. And I only coach venture-backed CEOs because that's the role I can play, because I have empathy around it. We've never done a job or played a sport. It's very hard
To be the coach.
to have physical empathy around it. A tennis player does not get a badminton coach; they get a tennis coach. And I think coaching's very, very important. And coaching is really the art of asking good questions. But if you have personal empathy around a topic, you just fundamentally ask better questions. And I think, that's why being a founder is super hard, because as Ben Horowitz says, there's no manual for it. The best CEOs will tell you they're great because they didn't give up, right? And they continued. And you kind of have to know a lot.
Yeah,
of
and even
things.
people in the coaching industry, because we had Geraldine, that's episode 10, talks about the fact that she gets coached and she has very specific coaches, fitness,
Actually, I have two.
business,
You have two,
and life coach. She doesn't put them in the same category,
Totally.
and she
Yeah.
turns them on and off as she needs them.
Yeah.
So even someone who's in the coaching industry will tell you,
Absolutely.
there's probably some form of specialism in coaching, which is good because
Yeah.
that's what you need, right?
Yeah, I have a coach, Rob Beer. I have a psychiatrist and a therapist.
So are you going to help us get Rob Beer? Because we're still
I think
trying
it's
to...
confirmed, right?
No,
I-
he's on LinkedIn saying he'll do it, but
Yeah.
I have no path to him.
Oh, I have a pat to him.
All right, so
Yeah.
Rob,
Okay.
you're on notice.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Sounds like a deal.
I think he'd be fun.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think it'll be great.
yeah, cool. All right.
Last question before we're gonna get to our routine. So you're a person that breaking boundaries.
Mm.
You're doing, you did so many things, and what I studied today is that you like to say the truth, not the right thing. And now let's speak about these entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
That we are thinking there are some of them in Singapore.
Mm.
They want to be JJ.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
What are you gonna tell them?
So I'll take you back to a hotel room in Ecuador in my first year as a business
This is far. Ecuador.
as a business school student. And at Stanford, we spent 2 years doing feedback. So it was a global study trip in Ecuador, and 6 of us decided that we would do a round robin of feedback for each other. And what I was told, this is when I was 26 years old, that I have this struggle of being liked, but also saying the thing that others don't have the courage to say. And I was advised by everyone in that room saying, I will help make the world better if I gave up on being liked by everyone and instead consistently say the things that people don't have the courage to say. And do it thoughtfully. I think my wife has taught me to say things in a way where you don't always have to provoke, right? Like you can say it in a way that doesn't put the other side on defensive. But once you switch off trying to be a people pleaser and trying to be liked by everyone, you have the confidence to say what's on your mind. And I think the second is I have very deep relationships with a lot of people. And so I polarize. I have my fair share of people who don't like me, but also people who I'm very, very close to, and including sort of having a great life partner and now a son. And I feel like once you're grounded in where your validation comes from, right? Like as long as my wife thinks highly of me, I don't largely care what the rest of the world thinks. I think you then have the ability to speak up and spend the energy to do the things that you want to do. But I couldn't do it if I didn't have the right foundations. And I think for me, my family and being Singaporean are two very grounding realities that make me feel like my bases are covered, that then allows me to take risk and fight for the things that I believe in.
Yeah, and I think some of that only comes with age and learning that there's just no compression algorithm for probably figuring that out, even though along the path we could be more cognizant of it. But I think
100%.
for me, some of it just came from like, I was probably too fearful to say my mind, even if I wasn't trying to go on the attack mode.
Yeah, and I think you were one of the first people I encountered in the ecosystem that, didn't care. And I think that's refreshing to not have a filter and to say things on your mind. And I have been inspired by that. And that's why we banter as much as we do.
Yeah, I think we get along that way. And I think it's hard sometimes to tell them. I try to tell them in person, like, I mean no ill will.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm going to tell you how I feel about it because, speeds everything up, to be honest and candid.
Yeah.
There's nothing to dance around, right?
And I think ecosystems get built by healthy, respectful debate.
Yeah.
Right? And we have to have that to grow.
Yeah. I keep having sidebar conversations with Mr. He and Go, but he won't step up to the table yet, but we're going to keep working on him. So Hean, if you watch, which I don't think you do, anybody who knows Hean and watches it, tell Hean, like, we'd love to see him here. I'm going to keep trying.
I've seen 1 or 2 episodes.
Yeah, because he's another person that I think is Singaporean in the system who, generally speaks his mind and is very...
We've never met. We've traded LinkedIn comments, but we
very opinionated about where to take it, which is good. All right.
Maybe I should take it. I will take it with the end.
Mr. Go?
Maybe.
Yeah, give it a whirl. Yeah.
We'll try.
Yeah. It's not like I don't talk to him all the time. It's just we haven't been able to land him. So, but we're getting better at landing people. So, okay. Some of this you've hinted on, but we'll just get really direct. You go back, you're 20, but you get to call each other. What are you telling him?
Yeah, not to worry, right?
That's a good one.
And I think...
Does that mean you did?
So people don't know about this me, but I grew up in a service household that was very risk averse, and a lot of things were believed to be beyond reach, right? And like I was told not to be audacious. When I applied to Harvard and Stanford, my father said, "Why are you applying to Harvard and Stanford? Apply to INSEAD. That's good enough." And so there's always been both a chip on his shoulder to prove myself, but also being told, "Look, that stuff's not for you." Like, I remember being at business school and people applying to be Google product managers. I'm like, "Oh, I don't think I'm worthy of that." And so that's taken time to chip away. And I did not always believe in myself. I think Stanford and Uber have been two institutions that have really helped to sort of increase my own self-confidence. But a lot of people, don't know this about me, but I wasn't necessarily like this all the time. I was a fighter on the outside, but there's a lot of self-doubt.
Got it.
And I think, the basis of white privilege in many ways is people being told when they're young that they can be whatever they want. And if you're a minority, if you're a woman, you're an introvert, you're not given that message all the time. And I think that has a very deep impact on people's trajectories, and you can be what you want.
Fair. Good points.
So, as a co-founder, you're working hard. But what do you do for your mental break, to keep you insane?
Yeah, so I think fitness is a complex concept, and I'm very interested in it. And I kind of break down fitness into social fitness, mental fitness, and physical fitness. I would say I do very well on social fitness. I generally have high quality relationships, don't isolate myself, like hang out with people. I do okay on mental fitness. I go to a therapist every week. I'm also clinically diagnosed with anxiety, so I take anxiety meds, have a psychiatrist. I listen to a lot of good content. I try and read about 10 pages of a book a day. So I do things around my mental fitness. I'm sure I could do more. I don't regularly meditate. I'm trained in TM, but I don't practice it, and I'm sure I can do. And then I'm pretty bad on the physical fitness front, which probably shows on camera at some level. I used to be...
The lighting's good.
used to be a lot more fit before I was a founder, and at some point I'll go back to it. But there's a lot of benefits to just walking for 30 minutes a day and just eating well and drinking water. And so I'm trying to get better. I try and drink at least 3 liters of water a day. Actually, water is just very good for you. And it's one of those like not spoken about aspects of being healthy that is just huge.
Okay, so
and and even if you don't want to go to the gym and work out hardcore, just like 30 to 40 minutes of walking with a podcast on, listen to the generalists on a walk.
Thank you.
Every day.
And subscribe. Hit the subscribe button.
That's good for you.
Yeah.
But I tell people being a founder is like climbing Mount Everest, but of the mental kind. And if you don't train, you'll actually die. And I don't think enough founders sort of do the work to keep them going. And there are cases where relatively healthy people just drop dead. And so I think mental health, mental fitness, I think because we call it mental health, there's a stigma to it. People are proud of having a fitness trainer, but they're shy about having a therapist. I proudly tell people I have a therapist because you should be proud of it. And that I invest in my mental fitness.
Awesome. Yeah, the doctor we had on before, Arun, is starting another thing that I just had an event last week where he's just trying to help build resilient founders, both mentally and physically. And that was pretty well attended. So I think he's going to do some interesting things on.
Yeah, and I saw that post.
Yeah, because his view is like we don't talk about it enough. Both resiliency being both physical and mental, and we all know there's stories of founders that have had some serious mental struggles. And we tend to sweep it under the rug, and we shouldn't because it's a hard job, right?
Totally.
Back to that, just celebrating who they are. You said you read. Anything to recommend on the book side that?
Yeah, so a lot of people that my wife says if you start a book you have to finish it. I disagree.
I don't.
I kind of read like 4 or 5 books at one time and move around.
Did you get a chance to go to a movie? and go
Yeah.
out in the middle.
Right, correct.
It's okay.
Right. Yeah,
I'm okay with that, by the way.
Correct.
I did it twice.
Yeah, I just sleep, right? So I just watch in golf class and just go to sleep, right? Like that. That's my way of
The
dealing with
aircon,
it.
the chair.
Correct. So
Quiet.
and if you watch like most movies, you miss the middle 20 minutes. You don't miss much anyway, so it works.
As long as you wake up
But I
towards the end.
recently started this book called The Brief History of Intelligence by a guy called Max Bennett. I think he's in his 30s.
Brief history of intelligence.
Yeah, and
Sounds
a
like
brief,
Jewish. Bennett.
might be.
Okay, maybe.
He's American. And the book talks about just the genesis of human intelligence, and actually this notion that AI is kind of a flawed term because GPTs are not artificial intelligence. It's not intelligence because it's not derived in any way similar to how humans derive intelligence. And actually, if we truly want to build AGI, we'll have to mimic how humans are intelligent, which we just haven't done at all. And I think it's fascinating as we think about the future of the world. And obviously, I think AI is to knowledge workers what factories were to manual laborers. And so I think we should all be very interested in where AI is going and what differentiates humans from computers. And so I just got going, but it's the book that I've seen flow the fastest, and so I'm very keen to continue.
You might actually finish it.
I think I will. I think I will finish
And
it.
it's okay if you're not.
That's a goal.
Yeah. I couldn't finish like *Sapiens* and
I can't finish any of his
thinking fast,
books.
thinking slow. Like a lot of those books I've tried, but they're like just too dense to be able to finish them. And so there are many of these like they're on my shelf. But
This is why
but
I really, I don't know if you've read
made
it.
them
This is
through
why I
the
really
right
love Shoe Dog. Have you read Shoe Dog?
I have.
Because you get this like historical plus sports, but it's really good storytelling of all the little bits and bytes. But it's also a business book.
Yeah. Open by Andrew
Like,
Agassi
You
is
should,
also
you
very
should
good.
give me that one.
I don't know
Did you
if I
finish
have
the
it.
book that I gave you?
I haven't. I don't think the really short one. That
Yeah.
yeah. You've never read Shoe Dog?
No.
Oh, I don't think I have it physically.
Phil
but
Knight
it's
was
really-
my business school commencement speaker.
It's a really good read,
Okay.
Shoe Dog.
I
All right.
will.
Well, we got to cut. Thank you, JJ, for doing
Thank
this.
you so much.
Yeah.
No, this was great. Thank you for having me.
I don't think we have too many things we have to censor, so that's job well done. And, thank you very much.